Would you consider volunteering for the medical team that supports the TT races in the Isle of Man? 150 people do that every year, coming from all over the world, and now they do it under the watchful eye of Dr Gareth Davies. After 3 decades working in emergency medicine in London, he has moved back to the Isle of Man and is now medical director of the world-famous motorcycle racecourse that draws tens of thousands of people to this place, nestled between the island of Ireland and mainland UK. I'm Catherine Levin, editor of Emergency Services Times, and in this episode of For Every Response, I talked to Gareth about what it's like to oversee the medical operation for this world-famous sporting competition. The racing takes place on a course around 37 miles long that covers much of the island, starting out in the nation's capital, Douglas. With origins going back to 1907, the island is steeped in its history, and the annual event draws tens of thousands to the Isle of Man to watch motorbikes, who may do many laps of the island's roads, which are closed for up to 8 hours at a time. We kick off this conversation by finding out what drew Gareth back to the place of his childhood after decades working in emergency medicine in deprived areas of London.
I did 30 years in London, based in Whitechapel, which is quite a deprived area of London. If readers or listeners are not familiar with it, you think of the Monopoly board, and it'll tell you a little bit about what Whitechapel is like. But I spent 30 years working in a major trauma centre there at the Royal London Hospital, Barts Health, and as part of my role there, as well as working in emergency medicine, I was the medical director for London's helicopter air ambulance, which was a service that specialised in treating the seriously injured of London. So, yes, I had 30 really enjoyable years in London. I was very, very lucky and privileged to help grow that team and be part of it for such a long time.
And so you've brought all that expertise back to the place of your birth. So what's the transition been like? So you spent 30 years in the capital working in Whitechapel and then back in the Isle of Man. In terms of the work you're doing now, so you're back in a hospital on the Isle of Man and you're dealing with the Isle of Man air ambulance. So can you give us a sense of the contrast between those two things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously working in London was quite spectacular in terms of the area you were responding to and the sheer busyness of the city. We were seeing 5 or 6 seriously injured patients, either shootings, stabbings, car crashes, falls from height in a day. So it was pretty intense. And through that period, we also responded to a lot of the major incidents that had befallen the capital over that sort of 30-year period, going back to the period of the terrorism from the IRA in the early part of my career back in sort of 1993, which transitioned into a lot of incidents on the railway infrastructure. So some of you may be familiar with Paddington Rail disaster, Potters Bar rail crash. We were responding to them. And then more latterly, the events, terrorist events around the London bombings, which I'm sure people are familiar with. So it was quite an intense period. Coming back to the Isle of Man, you might feel would be a bit of a downhill move, but actually working on an island such as this, there are huge challenges that just as exciting to deal with. We although we're a relatively small hospital, it's got a really vibrant spirit. I worked for Manx Care in the emergency department, as well as my role at the TT. And it has a really lovely feel, a hospital of that size working in it. And because the island may be cut off from the mainland for a day, sometimes 2 days, we have to be able to survive, no matter what is chucked at us. So that in itself brings really exciting challenges for people who work in the emergency services or work at the hospital. So actually, I found it really, really exciting and really exhilarating, because we can do things, I think, that are very difficult in the UK when organisations are so big. So it is a position where, whether you work in the police or the fire or the ambulance service, everyone gets to know everyone, and actually you have an opportunity of really doing end-to-end care. So you can pretty much control things from the point of wounding to getting it to hospital. So we're very fortunate that our ambulance service is supported by a fire service and police service that have a medical capability themselves. So it's not unusual to have a patient injured here on the island where the police force will have actually administered quite a lot of care to a patient before the health services get there. So you may expect the patient to have a tourniquet on, you might expect the patient to have an A in and things like that. And that's quite a unique link in the chain of survival that's quite hard, I think, across to deliver. To some degree, we were very lucky in London that the Metropolitan Police Force, certainly the firearms teams, had extended training when it came to penetrating injury, and they had often dealt with the patients. So we're sort of seeing a similar thing here on the island, but it does allow us actually to produce survival in trauma patients that actually, when I was at London, we'd be really chuffed with and crowing about certain patients that have been in traumatic cardiac arrest, which is difficult. Survival from that is relatively rare. And actually, when you have a work in a community like the Isle of Man, because you've got all those links in the chain, actually, you can produce survival that many places would just dream of producing at the end of the day. So it's been quite an easy transition when you transition to something like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you describe the way in which you're working police, fire and ambulance together, and the differences between where you are now in London, but so many similarities, because that need to work together, to have practice together, to use Jessup principles, presumably they apply on the Isle of Man as much as they do on the mainland.
Yep.
But with that smaller environment, I think it's interesting in terms of the air ambulance side of things. In terms of call-outs and the sort of volume, you've got fixed aircraft. I saw that you didn't have helicopters. Is there a reason why you're using fixed rather than helicopters?
So yes, there are the air ambulance services that are used on the Isle of Man are actually quite complex, and certainly in TT week, they're super complex. So as the backbone for retrieval, we have a fixed wing service that operates between Ronaldsway Airport and Liverpool. We have recently sought a contract with the Great North Air Ambulance, which is one of the HEMS providers in the UK, and they support us with their team during daylight operations, with the aim of certain patients trying to get them primarily straight to a major trauma centre. But obviously that isn't available all the time because of climate issues and weather issues that may prevent them attending. And obviously it's not a service that's operating in the dark at the moment. But in TT week, we actually then have some other rotary wing assets, helicopters that we use. So for the racing, we have 2 helicopters dedicated to the racers, and then there is a third helicopter which is used by the Man Ambulance Service to help patients on the island get into the hospital, because actually the hospital is based inside the course during racing periods. There is some road access from the outside to the inside of the course, but that's relatively limited. So it's important that the local community have exactly the same access to emergency healthcare that they would have outside of the racing. So we have this additional aircraft that complements the service. And then on top of that, we have all of the search and rescue helicopters that support the island, some of them from Southern Ireland and from Irish search and rescue, and others from the UK search and rescue services. So they may bring us patients off ferries in the Irish Sea that have got problems with patients falling ill on them, or they may undertake winching rescues off the coast of the Isle of Man. So actually, in the middle of TT week, if you include all the filming, helicopters and what have you, the hospital has 3 helipads, believe it or not. And sometimes it looks a bit like a scene from Vietnam with helicopters coming in, taking off, landing. It's quite spectacular and pretty special, I think.
I wasn't expecting that, I have to say, all of that description. I was thinking, oh, yes, we have 2 planes and that's what we work with. That's amazing. So you have the working with the Great North Air Ambulance, you've got the search and rescue ones, you've got all sorts going on. And as you say, the media, no doubt, bringing all their helicopters in for the event. So in terms of the TT arrangements, you've described the kind of business as usual there in terms of the hospital, the fire, police, ambulance, that kind of relationship that you have. But in terms of the TT, you are increasing the population on the island many times, I expect, through a period of, I think it runs May through June. So how are you bringing together a team to support you to provide medical care in this very unusual environment? Where are they all coming from?
Well, I think there's 2 elements to that. And I suppose a bit of background on the numbers that are involved. There are roughly about 80,000 population here on the Isle of Man. But over the TT week period, that might increase by over 50,000 people. So it's quite a significant increase in the population over that period. And that brings with it not just the work that might be related to the racing. When you have that many people, it's basically a mass gathering situation. So there are people who will have incumbent sort of healthcare problems that will come on holiday. And so we see an increase in pretty much everything from, strokes, heart attack, infections, you name it. There is a spike of problems that we have to sort out. So the healthcare resources have to flex up in 2 ways. The hospital has to increase its capacity to deal with this. So pretty much the whole hospital plans for this racing. Every service is involved in some shape or form. So we will see an increase of numbers of staff working in the emergency department, in anaesthetics, in orthopedics, and what have you. There'll be changes to the arrangements for theatres over that period. So the sort of operations that will be done won't necessarily be long operations that would block theatres. Should someone befall an accident and need real rapid access to the theatre complex. So lots of changes. And obviously even things like blood bank have to increase their resources when you've, that sort of increase in the population. So it's a real stress test for the island, without a shadow of a doubt. But it's actually a way of producing really, I think, high caliber care, because we're lucky that we get stress tested every year. So we do major incident training, from April into June in the racing, where not many district general hospitals will be doing many major incident exercises in their A&E every weekend for 6 weeks prior to the racing. It puts a natural pressure on us that we have to respond to. But I mentioned the 2 elements of increasing the health resources. The second element is the resources that are dedicated to the TT racing itself, which has again grown quite significantly over the last few years. So over the event, we will have in the region of 150 volunteers, and those volunteers are a mixture of paramedics, technicians, doctors, and doctors from all specialties, from intensive care to trauma surgery, emergency medicine, GPs that will support as trackside medics. And on top of those professional groups, we have a team of physiotherapists and sport masseurs. We have a psychologist in the team. We have a research team of 8 nurses. There are several research projects that are going on throughout the racing. We have thermal therapy team this year for hot and cold therapies for the competitors, and a team of doctors and nurses that undertake health checks on the riders before they can compete. So this is one of the only events in the world, I think, where the competitors will have a health check at the event to be super sure that everyone is in the best condition to race in something as testing as this. So it's a big team. And actually, I forgot the medical students. So we have a medical student program as well of electives that join us, and we train them in first aid, and they work as first aiders as trackside medics. So it's a big group. And I think in terms of the delivery of emergency healthcare, it's divided into the 2 distinct parts. There are the trackside medics that are placed strategically around the course, along the 37 miles, and they will be placed at points that we know have historically caused problems, or perhaps there's a big crowd there. And those trackside medics are also supported by the 2 helicopters and 7 response cars for the urban areas of the track. And those services are set up as the same as any enhanced care team in the UK or HEM service. So we, having worked in London for 30 years, we very much mimicked the service that we provided in London is mimicked during the races.
Can I just tip you back to a couple of things that you said there? Some really useful insights. So you've got a team of 150 volunteers. You outlined all the different types of people. Where are they coming from? Are they people already working on the island? Is there like a kind of program where you kind of like say, would you like to come and do this? And then people come and apply. How does it work? How do you find all those specialists to come to you for 2 weeks, live on the island and do that work for you? And are they just doing it for free?
Yeah. So they are volunteers, and we help them to some degree with their travel expenses, but it's a fairly unique position that there's no way we could run the service if this was people were working at commercial rates. It just simply wouldn't work. Same with the marshals. There's nearly 1,000 of them. So we're very fortunate to have these, and we don't do any advertising. We have a website. Most of it is, I think, by reputation and hearsay, but we have people join us from all over the world. So we have a very senior trauma surgeon from Germany who's been with us now for decades, coming over and supporting us, and has a very big job back in Germany. He's the medical director of multiple hospitals. So quite high caliber, high level individuals will come back and support the racing, and that's true of everyone. And we try and repay our team by giving them a good experience, a unique insight to the world of pre-hospital care and trauma care, because people are seeing it in what we call the hyper-acute phase. So, when you're at the event, these incidents may happen in front of you, or you may be a minute or two, and you're seeing injury in a phase that most other people don't see. Even in London, it was not a big place in terms of size. London, it's only 25 miles wide, and you've got a helicopter there. Even then, you're getting to patients 10, 15, 20 minutes after the point of wounding. So you're not quite engaged or dealing with that hyper acute phase, which is unique to this event. So, and we put on a lot of education throughout the event. We sim, exercise every day. Simulations going on at the helipad, left, right, and centre. Every race day, there are simulations that are taking part on corners around the track itself, where the marshals will interact with the trackside medics, and they'll do little micro simulations of getting a competitor off the road, a scoop, getting their helmets off, doing the necessary airway maneuvers whilst one of the aircraft inbound to support them. So, and that seems to be well received by people, because we do end up having to turn people away, believe it or not. It's quite gutted. I mean, literally last night we had to turn a medical student from Singapore who wanted to do an elective with us, and hopefully he'll be with us in 2027. But so yeah, we're getting people from all over the world joining us to bring this together. We're very fortunate, and I think, sometimes working with volunteers can be difficult, because I'm sure this isn't lost on you or anyone listening to this, that when you're working in this sector and you've got volunteers, it doesn't mean you can provide a lower standard of work. All these volunteers have to meet exactly the same standards that any air ambulance meets in the UK. So they're practicing the same medicine. They are all trained in thoracotomy. They're all trained in how to do open heart surgery at the side of the road. They all carry blood, and plasma and blood products, like an AM service would in the UK. So it's not a step down. It's exactly the same, and just because you volunteer, it doesn't change. So in many ways, we have a group that are highly passionate and motivated to do that, but we can't let standards drop. We have to be absolutely on top of everything, just as any other service would be in the UK.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the emergency services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
It's interesting you use this phrase, this hyper acute phase. So they're coming to you to experience something that they probably never experienced in their career, in terms of that, the immediacy of what they're seeing and getting to them to respond, and because of the nature of the track and the racing. In terms of the stress testing you talked about and this simulation, this continuous simulation, it sounds quite tiring. So I wonder, how do you balance out that kind of need to be prepared, but then being able to actually respond so you don't burn people out too early? How do you balance that out with your volunteers and the timing, so that when you get to May, June, your preparations are optimized, but you haven't burnt everybody out by doing too much of it? How do you get that right?
So you're absolutely right. It is, when you've got passion and enthusiasm, sometimes it has to be contained. And actually this year we're going to be quite focused rest periods for people, because even in a race day, that could be over a 12-hour shift, inverted commas. Although the roads are set to close at a certain time and racing starts at 10 o'clock, we have to be there for about 7:30 to set up the helipad, to start the simulations, do all the equipment checks. So actually our days are a lot longer than most of the marshals or other providers around the race. And of course, at the end of the day, there's also the debriefing. So the days can be very long. And in particular, if racing gets pushed back, or the start gets delayed because of bad weather or what have you, those days can get very long. So we're minded this year to make sure that people are having the appropriate rest breaks in all of this and having time off in between. And now the schedule has been really focused on making sure, not just for the marshals and the medics, but for the competitors themselves, there are rest days. So it's not every day people are out there, because the days can be so long. But I think, you're absolutely right. The well-being of the team is super important. And like everything else, we have to make sure that when they're out there on the track, that they're looking after themselves with hydration, nutrition. And I'm talking about the medics now, not the competitors, that they've got sunscreen and things like that. So there's a lot of work that's focused around the volunteers' safety as much as anyone else's.
And the competitors, when they're preparing for races, I mean, these are athletes, they're professionals, they're doing this is probably a highlight of their career to do the TT. So I wonder, in terms of what do they know about what you can do should the worst happen? They know it's a high risk sport. There is the potential to crash. And when I imagine at speed, that is quite something to see. So how much do they know about what you can do in order that when you come to them, they know what's going to happen? So just trying to understand the interaction between you actually at this hyper acute phase, as you called it earlier.
In terms of the competitors, it's really important that the health services that are here for them, they understand that we're there to work with them, not just when in their moment of need, if some incident happens, but we're actually here for them to make sure that they are physically fit, that they are in the best health to be doing this. And by that, I mean also physical and mental health to be racing on the island. So there's been a significant shift in terms of the medical team focus on the competitors to support them, and hence the sports massage and physiotherapy and the thermal therapies that are there for them. Obviously, we get to know the competitors now because they will see members of the medical team and nursing team when they're having their health checks.
I wonder if you could just talk us through, not in too much detail, about what would happen if somebody crashed. What would you do? And also, I'd like to understand the equipment that you're using. So what kit have you got that you're using? And is it any different to any other type of incident that you'd attend if you were a HEMS medic or arriving in a London ambulance service, for example?
Yeah. So how the service is set up, that during racing, if there is an incident, one of the marshals at the incident will press a button on a radio, and that radio will identify that an incident is alive on a certain sector of the course, and that will mean the medical team in the control room will be monitoring that situation. There's usually a period of silence until everything is died down a little bit, because they will, if there's a crash, they will literally press it as the crash is happening. So actually, the control room get to know about a crash as it's happening, and they also have, in many places, video that covers many parts of the circuit. So at that point, there may be a medic where the incident has happened. If there isn't a medic, there'll be a marshal who's trained in first aid, who will lead on patient care. They're the first link in the chain of survival. And obviously, those medical assets will be the first person to the patient side. Depending on where the incident is, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer in the control room might automatically scramble the aircraft to that incident. So the two helicopters are positioned at strategic points around the island to respond to various parts of it. And they may just immediately dispatch the aircraft or one of the response cars to that point if it's a very notorious part of the circuit. If it isn't, they'll put the aircraft on standby, which means that the captain and the medical team will go into the aircraft and sit with their helmets and secured in the aircraft, ready to start the engines, and they will wait for a medical report from those at scene. And we have a sort of coded system of triage, effectively, that describes competitors when they're injured, and on the basis of that, the doctor in the control room will choose or elect to send the team or not. And the response times, on the whole, pretty quick. There's virtually the zero time response of the marshals and the trackside medics. The helicopters are cut and cars are there as a supportive second wave. And when the team are tasked, they will deploy to wherever it is. The captain will make a decision on landing, and obviously they will tend to the patient once they're on the ground and able to get to the patient. And the care is exactly the same as any HEM service would provide, perhaps with the only other difference being that if the race is continuing, you have to get patients to a place of safety. That is an absolute priority. You can't leave patients on the racing line because competitors are still moving. So it's important patients are brought into what we call a place of safety, and that's where the patients can be worked on and looked after at that point. And to the question about equipment and medications and what have you, we use exactly the same as many of the air ambulances do in the UK. So the backpacks that are taken to the scene, the aircraft is equipped with, for every possibility, ranging from thoracotomy and blood transfusion at the scene, right down to simple ankle fractures and immobilizing broken bones and everything in between.
When I think about innovation and all of this practicing that you're doing year on year, have you seen a lot of change in terms of the need for more specialist things, or sometimes just that little tiny thing that can make such a big difference? What does innovation look like for the TT?
It's really important. And I mentioned that we had the research program that was going on, where we're looking to understand the impact, the physiological impact on riders, the biochemical impact. So the research program looks at rates, it looks at lactate levels, it looks at grip strength, it looks at hydration, it looks at temperature, and that is giving us information about what we need to do next. So some of these competitors they are working so hard, they'll have lactates at 7, heart rates of 150 for nearly an hour and a half. They'll lose up to 2.5 liters of fluid. Their temperature may be 39 degrees with all of this. And that's informing us around what we need to do from an innovation point of view. And so, for example, the issue of cooling jackets that you may have not seen some motorsports are beginning to use now. You see them in F1. We're looking at those this year. We're looking at G sensors to understand what sort of G forces the competitors are experiencing, not just during the race, but during incidents as well, and how we can ameliorate them from airbags and other protective systems. And on the medical, sort of pure medical innovation front, we have a focus as much as any other organization in high performance CPR. So actually making sure that cardiac arrest victims are getting the highest possible cardiac output during their arrest is as much on our agenda as anyone else's. And there's lots of work going on around how you make best use of mechanical CPR in this situation that we're looking at. And I suppose I could maybe use this as a plea to manufacturers to reach out to us, because there are things that we looking at that have fallen out of the industry because of a few studies that have probably, I think it's fair to say, confused medicine around what is the right thing to do. So there are certain devices, such as cooling jackets for patients in cardiac arrest, that aren't on the market anymore, but we're looking out to use, and trying to find manufacturers that have them is incredibly difficult now. Some of the audience may remember the ACD device, the active compression decompression device, which is another device that we've got an interest in at the moment, but again has disappeared out of industry at the moment. But we do need industry to talk to us and other providers around what we're thinking at the moment and what we'd like to bring back into practice that might have disappeared. So innovation isn't always about something that's absolutely new. There are bits that have fallen past that need to be reinvigorated.
Oh, wasn't that great? What an interesting interview. So much going on the Isle of Man. I'm really struck by listening back to this interview about the level of exercising and training going on. Sim, says Gareth, meaning simulation. But in the world of the emergency services, we talk about exercising. That may take place once a year, but on the Isle of Man in TT season, it's happening every day. Imagine that. Imagine your heart rate staying at 150 beats per minute for an hour. The physicality of motorsport comes across really strongly in Gareth's responses. He talks at length about medical response in a way that is detailed and yet accessible to people like me, and maybe you, who know little about this world. He lulls you with his quiet calm, and while you hear less from me than usual, I'm okay with that, because it's fascinating. And I hope you agree. And I hope there are suppliers listening to this who can take Gareth up on his plea to reach out and help with areas of innovation, to hone and finesse this fine art of emergency medical care taking place trackside, where they are working in the hyper-acute phase, a place where not many people get this level of exposure. My thanks to Gareth for taking time to talk to me. So that's it from me for now. Episodes of this series drop every Tuesday. All our podcast episodes are sponsored by MSA Safety, and we're so grateful to them for their support. Be sure to share, like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.